Sure, the number here is 8506597. Gay Mitchell, MEP presidential candidate, is here with me. Hello, Irene.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You're straight through to Gay Mitchell. What have you got for him?
Good evening, Gay. How are you?
Irene, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Gay, I want to ask you, I come from a completely opposite side to Damien in that I believe the presidency is probably the most prestigious post you can hold in this country. And like yourself, I would agree that our current and previous presidents have done a wonderful job. But I want to ask you about all the controversy that there has been in this particular campaign with regard to potential candidates writing letters on behalf of people who have been convicted or have been tried for crimes. Clemency letters, I think they've kind of been commonly known as. And I want to ask you just very directly to tell me, as a citizen and as an eligible voter, do you think it's fair that one candidate was virtually forced to withdraw from the campaign because of a letter, while another candidate or other candidates can remain in, having also written these letters?
I'm afraid I do, Irene. I do think so. You see, you're not comparing like with like. Somebody wrote to a judge about somebody they were involved in the middle of a case. The people who were working with that candidate all withdrew because of, I don't know what the full contents are. In the case of somebody who's already been sentenced, it happened here, for example, a man called Pringle was sentenced to be hanged. He was the last person to be sentenced here. The government then met and they were, under the Constitution, allowed to reduce that sentence. And that would have been raised in the Dáil or by people writing to him. Do you know, in the United States, 71 people on death row were subsequently released from prison because they were found to be innocent. And 23 innocent people have already been executed since the death penalty was introduced. So, you know, there's no member state in the European Union, incidentally, that can have the death penalty because it's against the treaties of the European Union. And the European Union has campaigned against this, and Amnesty International has campaigned against this. But it is in order to write to somebody after the event and say, look, don't put them to death, don't inject them, don't shoot them, don't hang them, don't gas them, don't electrocute them. Give them 40 years in prison, which is what happened to the man here, but don't put them to death. I think that's a perfectly humane thing to do. It's the basis of Amnesty International.
And just to get some understanding around it, Irene, what is your own feeling on the death penalty?
Well, it's not, Scott, I will answer you, but I just want to say, you know, it's not actually about the death penalty and whether you agree with it or not. That wasn't what I was asking. What I was asking is, if I'm running for presidency and you're running for presidency and it's found that I have written a letter in support of somebody, no matter what stage in their case that was, I wrote a letter to support somebody, you wrote a letter to support somebody, I had to resign, but you didn't.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess, I mean, I didn't write the letter and I'm not running for the presidency.
No, either did I, but I'm just trying to say, I think that's
Just let me say this, Irene, because I said I'm not running for the presidency.
No.
It occurs to me, just as a detached observer, that in one case, and, you know, we're not mentioning any names, so let's carry on with that pretense here, Irene. Somebody writes on behalf of somebody in a case where they've been convicted of a crime. The involvement between the writer and the person they're interceding on behalf of wasn't stated, and that's the key point, right? The other letter to me is a letter to a jurisdiction, a jailer, a justice minister, a head of state, which is, please don't murder somebody, don't kill them, notwithstanding what they have done. Because we in Ireland, we have no death penalty in Ireland. Each of us, I think, Irene, must make up their own minds about where we stand on this issue. My own personal colours to the mast, I don't believe in the death penalty.
No, I don't believe in the death penalty either,
yeah,
but what I do believe in is fairness and equality for everybody.
Yeah, but you see, there is fairness and equality, I think, if we have like with like, and we've talked about this death penalty issue many, many times on this programme, and I've had a couple of people on the phone who say to me, there should be the death penalty. We eventually, after, 5 minutes, end up the death penalty in the case of these 3 crimes, or those 2 crimes. But that's what I see as the issue. I'm going to let Gay Mitchell fight his own corner.
Just let me say one thing to Arlene. Yeah. First of all, I read Lord Pierpoint's autobiography. He was the official hangman for Britain and Ireland, and he says in that the death penalty doesn't work. Now, you asked me a question and I answered it directly. I have no doubt that David Norris and Michael D. Higgins also wrote asking that people not be executed. David wasn't put out on that basis. This is something that Amnesty International regularly ask parliamentarians to do. I've done it. I've actually issued press statements saying I'm handing in letters.
Will you publish the letters?
If I have them, I will.
You will.
I've actually published a letter, and if I can find them, I will. No problem. I've actually the day I handed in a letter to the U.S. Embassy. I issued a press release saying I was handing it in on the 500th person, when it came to a woman being stoned to death in Nigeria under Sharia law because she was caught in adultery. As chairman of the European Affairs Committee, I engineered that the Nigerian ambassador come before the European Affairs Committee to stop that. And it was stopped.
Now, on that case, and Irene is still there with us, and just briefly, because I don't get more calls on, somebody spoke to us, Gay, about that very case.
And it does not stop people murdering.
We have to move on. Irene, you don't have to agree, but we thank you for your point.
All right, and the best of luck to you, Gay.
Thank you, Irene.
There we are. Thanks very much. Irene there, walk us down. Gay Mitchell, MEP, is presidential candidate for Fine Gael, nominated by the... And Irene's back on the line. Hello again, Irene.
Hello, Scott.
Now, you weren't happy at all, I hear.
No, not a bit. I think Gay Mitchell may as well have driven around the Walkinstown roundabout. He avoided my question that much. I don't think he answered me at all. And I didn't mean my couple of minutes of an opportunity to ask him a question to turn into a pro or anti-death penalty debate. That's not what I rang in for. You know, I wanted to ask him, basically, if it is good enough for one candidate to run, having written letters of clemency on behalf of people, is it not good enough for others? And it's a very direct question. And, you know, when I said, is it not fair, is that fair for one not to? He said, I don't agree. You know, and that was it. And then went off to talk about the death penalty.
Well, yeah, I know. We actually, because I knew you were coming on, we listened back to the recording in just that segment. And the first thing he said was, I don't think it's like with like, was what he said.
Yeah, but he's right, Scott. It's not like with like, because he wrote a letter for somebody he never met. David Norris, let's call a spade. There's no point in messing around. We all know we're talking about David Norris.
Yeah, but David wrote the letter and says he wrote it.
David wrote a letter on behalf of somebody he knew, and what struck me as very ironic, Gay Mitchell, 3 times in the pre-questions, 3 times he mentioned suicide as being something he's concerned about. The person David Norris wrote the letter for had attempted suicide, which is why David Norris intervened, as any humanitarian would. Now, I'm not on here to fight David Norris.
No, I know you're not, Irene.
He's able to do it himself. I'm just trying to make a point. I think he's as entitled to be on that ballot paper as Gay Mitchell is, whether I vote for him or not, or you do or not.
I know. And the one remaining thing to add is that David wrote the letter for his partner.
Ex-partner, Scott.
I know, but there was a relationship there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. But
Whereas Gay wrote it for a complete stranger.
Total stranger.
So where's the like with like there? Don't get me wrong, Scott, I have absolutely no tolerance to think any woman should be brought out and stoned. But one of the most controversial letters that Gay Mitchell wrote that has come out is about this Paul Hill, who was put to death in 2003 because he murdered 2 doctors outside a clinic in America. It was a very well-known case. And a week before he died, he refused to express remorse.
Okay.
Ezra Nawi, who was the gentleman that David Norris wrote the letter on behalf of, expressed afterwards his regret for what had happened. So I think there's a big, big question to be asked there as to what's fair and what's not fair. But as I said, David Norris is far more articulate than me, and he's well able to fight his own corner. I just hope everyone else that, you know, there's 21,000 people online and over 5,000 on a petition that want him back on paper.
We've had people onto the show, Irene, who want David Norris back in the field, and that is a viewpoint that is out there. For reasons of balance on the programme, my own views regarding whether Norris should run or not, I'm keeping to myself.
Of course you will, Scott, and I appreciate that. But all I'm trying to say to you is, what really scares me at the moment is the huge amount of people online, and I have seen it on. Go on, I ask any of your listeners, you can't say it, but I can. www.WeWantNorris.com. Go on to it and have a look at the amount of people that intend to spoil their vote. That's a disgrace.
Well, I mean, and it was
put them on the paper and let the people decide after that.
Yeah, we can't, you see, because the Senator Norris...
No, you can't, but I'm asking, somebody can. And you know something, Gay Mitchell would get an awful lot more votes, in my view, if he stood up and said, hang on a minute, lads, I wrote these letters too.
Well, I asked...
he shouldn't have had to stand down.
He said if he could find letters over the years, he would publish them. Stay with me now, Irene. You know the routine.